On November 10, 2015, the life of 30-year-old Pastor Davy Blackburn was forever altered when he returned home from the gym to his residence on Sunnyfield Court in Indianapolis, Indiana, only to be confronted with his worst nightmare. Inside the house, his 28-year-old wife, Amanda Blackburn, who was 12 weeks pregnant, lay on the living room floor, partially nude, grievously injured and covered in blood. Rushing upstairs, he discovered their 15-month-old son Weston unharmed in his crib. Davy immediately dialed 911 as Amanda, though still alive, was in critical condition. Tragically, neither Amanda nor her unborn child would survive this horrific ordeal. The following day, on November 11, 2015, Amanda was removed from life support and passed away. Who could have perpetrated such a heinous act against a pregnant woman? Was it a random robbery gone wrong? Or were there much darker motives at play? Get ready to delve into the mysteries of this case. One that, while officially solved, continues to pique the curiosity of countless individuals who suspect that there's more than meets the eye. Amanda Grace Byers was welcomed into the world on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan, by her loving parents Phil and Robin Byers. She was blessed with an older brother, James, and an elder sister named Amber. As the youngest in the family, Amanda was enveloped in love, and in return never hesitated to bestow kindness upon others. She started school in Indianapolis, Indiana, before moving to Elkhart, Indiana, in 1995 with her family. Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006, and she furthered her education at Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida, where she earned an associate's degree in 2008. Described as both beautiful and graceful, Amanda exuded confidence and grace in all that she did. Her spirit of never giving up was a testament to her character, and throughout her life she steadfastly held on to her faith in God. Her family's strong Christian values, particularly her father's role as a pastor at the First Baptist Church in Elkhart, deeply influenced her. With a radiant smile that was her trademark, Amanda had a passion for uniting people and their faith in Jesus. It was only fitting that she would choose a life partner who shared her strong Christian values. And so she found Davy Blackburn. Davy, born on November 2, 1985, in Tuscaloosa, embarked on his educational journey at Tuscaloosa County High School before transferring to Shades Valley High School during his father's tenure as a pastor at Brookview Wesleyan Church in Birmingham, Alabama. He pursued higher education at Southern Wesleyan University in South Carolina, where he graduated with a degree in religion and media communication. Amanda and Davy met on a blind date set up by Amanda's sister, Amber, who was dating Davy's best friend, Gavin. It was October 1, 2005, and they all attended a concert featuring the Christian band Hawk Nelson. Although they didn't expect the date to go well, it turned out to be the beginning of something special. Their relationship moved quickly, but it faced the challenge of being long distance. They were both attending different colleges, and they could only see each other during breaks, typically for periods of about 2 weeks at a time. To make it work, they even sought counseling to improve their communication. Despite the distance, they knew they had found the one in each other and made the most of the time they could spend together. Davy saw Amanda as the missing piece that completed his life in a unique and irreplaceable way. Aside from Davy, Amanda shared an incredibly close bond with her sister, Amber, to the extent that they confided in each other about everything. They experienced significant life moments side by side, whether it was running marathons together or walking down the aisle together with their father. On August 1, 2008, Amanda and Davy Blackburn tied the knot shortly after Amanda's graduation. Following their nuptials, the couple initially established their home in Greenville, South Carolina, where Davy undertook the role of an assistant pastor at New Spring Church. However, the tug of their previous home grew stronger, prompting their return to Indianapolis by 2012. Together, this young couple embarked on a journey of creating Resonant Church, an institution designed to offer worship and guidance to young individuals, with its message finely tuned to resonate with the hearts of the youth. Amanda and Davy were both deeply committed to their church, with Davy serving as the pastor. Collectively, they invested a significant portion of their time in counseling and guiding the church community. They engaged in extensive discussions on topics such as relationship advice, marital challenges, and intimate relationships, drawing from their own experiences and faith to offer support and guidance to those in need. Alongside the church, their own family began to flourish as on July 28, 2014, the couple welcomed their son, Weston, into the world. As expected, Amanda proved to be an exceptional mother, dedicating all her time and love to her precious child. Therefore, the decision to expand their family further was an easy one. Amanda became pregnant for the second time in 2015. Although they never underwent an official test to determine the gender, both Davy and Amanda were convinced that their second child would be a girl. They even selected the name Everett for the baby, who was expected to arrive on May 18, 2016. Tragically, Amanda would never live to see that day. On the fateful morning of November 10, 2015, just shortly after 8:30 a.m., the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department received a distressing 911 call from Davy Blackburn. He had found his wife, Amanda, who was 12 weeks pregnant, collapsed inside their residence. In response to the urgent call, Indianapolis police officers swiftly arrived at the Blackburn residence, situated at the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court on the northwest side of Indianapolis. They initiated an inquiry seeking to understand the sequence of events leading up to this tragic discovery. According to his account, the day began like any other. He awoke at approximately 4:30 a.m., dedicated time to reading his Bible, and subsequently departed for LA Fitness Gym around 6 a.m. He explained that he had left the door unlocked due to the fact that, at the time, they possessed only one house key, which was attached to his wife's keyring. Davy explained that he had spent approximately an hour at the gym and then concluded his workout session, starting his drive back home. During his drive, he was engrossed in a phone conversation with a friend, which continued even after he arrived home around 7:30 a.m. To avoid disturbing Amanda and their 15-month-old son, Weston, Davy opted to stay in his car in the driveway to finish up his conversation. His phone conversation came to an end around 8:20 a.m., and he made his way into the house and stumbled upon a scene straight out of a horror movie. On the living room floor, Amanda was lying face down, unconscious and covered in blood. Davy said he was initially uncertain about what had transpired, believing that Amanda might have fainted due to a dizzy spell and that a decorative ladder in the living room had accidentally fallen on her. However, as he looked closer, he noticed that her pants were removed. Her underwear was neatly folded under her left thigh, and her shirt was pulled over her head, as if somebody was trying to take it off. Although she was lying in a pool of blood, she was still breathing. Deeply concerned about the safety of their 15-month-old son, Davy ran upstairs to reach Weston's room, where he found the child safe and unharmed in his crib. Overwhelmed by a flood of emotions, he promptly dialed 911 to request urgent assistance. When they entered the house, officers discovered Amanda in the exact condition Davy had described. She was clinging to life, and paramedics engaged in a relentless battle to resuscitate her. When that failed, they rushed her to the hospital in hopes of saving both her and her unborn child, racing against time. With this critical situation unfolding, the investigation swung into motion. Even though suspicion had never been directed at Davy, it was standard procedure to commence the investigation with a close examination of the spouse. So the investigators visited the LA Fitness Gym where Davy had been that morning. Following a thorough confirmation of his alibi, Davy was quickly cleared of any involvement in the murder. With this crucial step completed, the investigative efforts could be concentrated on the crime scene itself. The officers instantly observed a series of irregularities within the scene. Amanda's wallet and credit cards were strewn across the floor. A pack of Swisher Sweet cigars was conspicuously placed on the kitchen counter, and a decorative lamp had been knocked over in close proximity to where Amanda lay, all of which pointed to a violent struggle. The presence of the cigars was particularly perplexing as neither Amanda nor Davy were smokers. This scene bore the haunting marks of the violence and confrontation that had transpired just hours earlier. While investigators were diligently searching for clues, Amanda was fighting for her life. Tragically, she wouldn't survive. On November 11, 2015, she was taken off life support and passed away. along with her unborn baby, leaving her family in mourning over her tragic murder and desperate for justice. The autopsy report unveiled the cruel and horrific extent of the violence inflicted upon Amanda. Contrary to Davy's initial impression that she might have been struck in the head, the report indicated that she had sustained 3 gunshot wounds, one to her arm, another to her upper back, and the fatal one to the back of her head. In addition to the gunshot wounds, there were telling signs of trauma, including scratches on her left cheek, a split lip, and the loss of a lower tooth, painting a distressing picture of the physical ordeal she had endured. Throughout the crime scene, extensive DNA swabs were conducted, spanning the entirety of the house. This methodical investigation led to the discovery of a variety of items and pieces of evidence, such as a roll of duct tape, earphones, a bullet, and scattered change on the floor. Collectively, these findings painted a vivid picture of the chaos of the crime scene. Additionally, the caliber of the bullets was identified as either a .38 or 9mm, providing a crucial clue regarding the potential weapon utilized in this tragic incident. Another vital clue emerged within the confines of the home. Amanda's cell phone was located in her bedroom, and upon examination, investigators noticed that she had received an email alert at 7:53 a.m. on the morning of the home invasion, notifying her about a suspicious transaction involving her Chase debit card. Subsequent investigation revealed that the debit card had been stolen. This digital breadcrumb initiated a chain of investigative steps that would eventually lead the detectives to a series of ATM transactions. These transactions, in turn, led to the discovery of surveillance footage capturing a suspect in the act of attempting to withdraw money. The individual in the footage had wrapped a pink shirt around his face in an effort to conceal his identity, marking a significant breakthrough in the investigation. He was also wearing a dark-colored vest. This evidence unmistakably indicated that the home invasion had, in fact, been a robbery that tragically escalated into a deadly confrontation. Around the same time, a series of burglaries in the same vicinity began to reveal a pattern too conspicuous to overlook. On that very morning of November 10th at 5:23 a.m., Jacola Searsbrook, a resident of the same neighborhood, placed a call to 911 to report a break-in. She recounted to the police that she had woken at 4:30 a.m., only to discover her cell phone missing from her bedroom. As she ventured further, she discovered that her sliding glass door was ajar, her potted plants had been disturbed, and her Apple MacBook, purse, headphones, car keys, and even a pack of Swisher cigars were all gone. In an even more disturbing turn of events, her 2007 Chrysler Sebring was absent from the parking lot. The investigation also unveiled that the apartment's surveillance cameras captured still images of 3 individuals entering the premises. Although their identities remained undisclosed, it was determined that the burglars had gained access by cutting the porch screen and subsequently opening the sliding door. However, they had disabled the camera during the actual burglary, further obscuring their identification. The second 911 call that morning was placed at 8:17 a.m. by Allison Becker, a neighbor who resided on the same street as Davy and Amanda. She reported that she had not been at home that morning and returned to discover that her residence had fallen victim to a burglary. The thieves made off with 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink woman's sweater, an AT&T remote, a bag of oranges, and a few bed sheets, likely used to wrap the stolen items for transport. As the investigation unfolded, it became apparent that this apartment was also equipped with a security camera, which, much like the others, had been disabled. This time at 5:36 a.m. detectives pieced together that the burglars had entered the apartment by cutting through the porch screen and somehow managed to unlock the deadbolt securing the sliding glass door. To add to the unnerving atmosphere, it appeared that the robbers had settled in, consuming wine and beer before departing, leaving the empty bottles behind. These unsettling actions hinted at a disturbing level of confidence the burglars had. Detectives at this point believed that the same group might have been responsible for the string of burglaries in the area and could have been responsible for the death of Amanda and her unborn baby. As the police conducted inquiries throughout the neighborhood to seek information on any suspicious activities from the day of the robberies, they indeed found several individuals who had witnessed unusual occurrences. One neighbor recounted that just before 7 a.m. on the ill-fated morning, she had seen a man dressed entirely in black, with a hood concealing his head, walking in front of her house. Another witness recalled seeing the same man engaged in a loud conversation on his phone, with a t-shirt pulled over his face. By 7:10 a.m., yet another neighbor reported observing a Chrysler Sebring pull up alongside the man. The man was seen entering the car, which then quickly departed. This information expanded the investigative net, eventually revealing another crucial clue. Surveillance footage from one resident's camera captured both the car and the man. Another witness came forward to report that on the morning of November 10, 2015, she heard two loud noises accompanied by a woman's screams, a chilling detail that led the police to theorize that this might have been the moment when Amanda was attacked. The stolen Chrysler Sebring emerged as a pivotal link, unmistakably connecting the dots between the series of burglaries. Remarkably, it was discovered abandoned by the side of the road, not far from the Blackburn residence, on November 11, 2015, the very day Amanda tragically passed away. A comprehensive search of the vehicle led to the discovery of some of the stolen items alongside an ATM receipt, indicating a denied transaction attempt of 500 conducted using Amanda's debit card at 6:36 a.m. on November 10th. This evidence was supported by ATM surveillance footage capturing a man with his face concealed in a pink sweater, as previously mentioned. However, this time another significant piece of evidence emerged. The same man was seen in surveillance footage of a nearby ATM at 6:54 a.m., successfully completing a transaction for 400. This evidence strongly suggested that Amanda had been attacked almost immediately after Davy left the house that morning. Nonetheless, DNA samples were collected from the car and subsequently forwarded for testing, with the results screened through Cody's to identify any potential matches. By November 17, 2015, investigators received a breakthrough, a DNA match that finally put a suspect on their radar. The DNA discovered in the car was linked to a 21-year-old man named Jalen Watson. Intriguingly, Jalen had only been released from prison on August 6, 2015, following a previous conviction for burglary, and he was currently on parole. Delving into Jalen's Facebook account, detectives unearthed a connection between him and a 24-year-old man named Dino Gordon, who also happened to be on parole for burglary. The plot continued to thicken as the investigators tracked the location data associated with the phone numbers of both these men. On the morning of November 10th, the unfolding sequence of events began to reveal itself through the location pings from their phones. At 4:40 a.m., roughly coinciding with the timing of the first robbery, their phones pinged off the tower nearest to the initial home. This pattern recurred with the second robbery and chillingly corresponded to the estimated time of Amanda's murder at 6:25 a.m. The digital footprints left behind continued to be traced, leading investigators to the towers closest to the ATMs where Amanda's stolen debit card was used at 6:39 a.m. and then once more at 6:54 a.m. Gradually, the pieces of the puzzle were coming together, painting a clearer picture of the crime spree. Deeper scrutiny of Jalen's communications ultimately led to the discovery of the third and youngest member of the burglar trio, an 18-year-old named Larry Taylor Jr. A review of the communication records unveiled conversations that implicated Larry in the crime that morning. Born in 1997, relatively little was known about Larry, who would soon take on a central role in Amanda Blackburn's murder. Similar to his associates, Larry also had a criminal history that included misdemeanor charges, one of which involved an incident of public nudity and indecency where he had exposed himself to a woman in a parking lot. Investigators proceeded to obtain the phone number Jalen had provided for his parole board, which turned out to belong to his older sister, Jernita. When the police spoke with her, she disclosed that on the night prior to the tragic events, Larry, Jalen, and Dino had been hanging out at her apartment. They departed the apartment at 3:30 a.m. on November 10th. Additionally, she shared with the authorities that one of the three men had been wearing a dark vest that morning, corroborating a description provided by a witness. Jernita also handed over a 9mm pistol that had been brought to the apartment, likely by either Jalen or Dino, and left under her bed. On that fateful morning, the trio's criminal activities began with burglaries, which evolved into something far more sinister in no time. According to a confidential informant whose identity remained undisclosed, Larry, Jalen, and Dino had ventured out in the early morning hours with the intention of breaking into a residence to obtain some money. Larry had also brought along a .38 revolver with him. They arrived at Jacola Searsbrook's apartment on the east side of Indianapolis on foot. Larry was the first to gain entry into Jacola's apartment and then let the other two inside through the front door. Following the theft of numerous items, the trio fled the scene. Using Jacola's car for transportation, they initially drove to the residence of Jalen's child's mother, located near 38th and Kessler Boulevard, with the intention of him being dropped off there. However, as he was unable to establish contact with the woman, they departed and headed to a nearby neighborhood to engage in further burglaries. While in the neighborhood, the men noticed a house with a back porch that appeared vulnerable to intrusion. This particular residence was situated on Sunnyfield Court and belonged to Allison Becker, who was not present at home during that time. The men parked the car and gained entry to the home through the patio door. After spending some time inside consuming alcohol and stealing numerous items, they eventually exited the apartment to load the pilfered possessions into their car. It was at this point that Larry informed the others that he had observed someone departing from a neighboring home, leading them to believe that this residence might be unoccupied. Once they had completed loading their vehicle, the three of them drove to that particular home. It was the marital home of Amanda and Davy. Upon entering the residence through the unlocked front door, the men immediately spotted a purse on the kitchen counter, taking the money it contained and dividing it among themselves. Additionally, they confiscated some credit cards found there. As they continued to search the rest of the home, they unexpectedly encountered Amanda. The men formulated a plan to use Amanda's credit cards at an ATM to obtain money. Their initial attempt to persuade Amanda to accompany them was met with her refusal, and when they tried to physically compel her to leave, she resisted and dropped to the ground. So it was decided that Jalen and Dino would go to the ATM, while Larry would remain behind with Amanda and her son, who was still asleep in his room upstairs. The informant further disclosed that Jalen and Dino proceeded to drive to a nearby Chase ATM, but they encountered difficulties in using the card with that particular machine. Jalen and Dino then called Larry, who apparently provided them with the correct ATM passcode. From there, they drove to a different Chase Bank ATM located in the vicinity of 86th Street and Ditch Road. After parking there, Jalen exited the vehicle and approached the ATM. Given the cold weather, he wrapped the pink sweater that had been acquired from Allison's residence around his face. On this occasion, he successfully withdrew $400 from the ATM, which was then divided between Jalen and Dino. Meanwhile, Larry placed several calls to Dino, expressing his frustration and demanding that they return to the Blackburn residence to pick him up. Eventually, they complied with his request, but by the time they got there, Larry had already left the Blackburn house and was walking down the street with a backpack he had taken from the home. Larry was reportedly in a state of panic and urged the others to simply leave him behind. He instructed Jalen to drive to an apartment complex situated at 56 Georgetown, where they left him at the residence of an individual referred to as Shy. While en route, Larry disclosed to them that he had attempted to sleep with Amanda, but she had rejected his advances. As a result, he had shot her once, and as she fell down, he shot her again in the back of her head. Eventually, the men abandoned Jacola's car near 38th Street and Brookwood Drive in Indianapolis and went their separate ways. The diligent efforts of the Indianapolis police combined with the mounting evidence culminated in the arrest of all three individuals responsible for Amanda's tragic death. Just 2 weeks after the incident, Larry faced a total of 13 charges, including murder, burglary, criminal confinement while armed with a deadly weapon, and robbery resulting in serious bodily injury. His accomplice, Jalen, was charged with 10 offenses which included murder, burglary, robbery resulting in serious bodily injury, and auto theft. Initially, the third accomplice, Dino, was charged with burglary and theft, but as the case developed, he too faced charges of murder. The dark saga of Larry Taylor extended even further, with revelations about his potential involvement in other heinous crimes coming to light. On November 4, 2015, just a week before Amanda's murder, the lifeless body of Rolando Gonzalez Hernandez, a 27-year-old Mexican man, was discovered next to his car at his apartment complex, having been fatally shot in the head. Witnesses shared with authorities that Larry had openly boasted about a robbery and shooting that had occurred at the same apartment complex, using derogatory language to describe the victim based on his ethnicity. According to Larry, the robbery had produced a measly sum of $10 from Rolando's wallet. Additionally, it was alleged that Larry had confided in other witnesses about breaking into a woman's home and subjecting her to a terrifying assault at gunpoint. Despite these allegations, Larry was not charged with these crimes due to insufficient evidence. However, there was no escaping the consequences of his actions in the case of Amanda. Yet the legal procedure to bring Larry and his accomplices to justice was not only complex but long drawn out, spanning 2 to 3 years of legal maneuvering, plea negotiations, and the anticipation of a trial. Ultimately, Dino and Jalen reached agreements that required them to testify against Larry during his bench trial. In exchange for their cooperation, the murder charges against them were dismissed. Jalen was sentenced to 29 years in prison, while Dino received a 30-year sentence. The trial of Larry Taylor Jr. didn't start until December 2021. However, when it finally did, an unusual situation arose. His defense attorney successfully persuaded the court to withhold information about Amanda's unborn child from the jury, even though Larry had originally been charged with the baby's death as well. Nevertheless, the jurors somehow discovered Amanda's pregnancy during the trial, prompting the judge to declare a mistrial due to concerns that it might evoke sympathy from the jury. A second trial was scheduled for June 2022. However, another obstacle arose. Some jurors had become aware of the previous mistrial and were discussing it among themselves. As a result, the judge declared another mistrial, further prolonging the legal proceedings. The third attempt to try Larry for Amanda's murder was scheduled for October 2022. In this trial, the prosecution relied on the testimonies of Dino and Jalen, cell phone data, and other witness accounts. Thankfully, the trial proceeded without any more unexpected revelations, and by September 2022, a verdict was reached. Ultimately, Larry Taylor was convicted on various charges, which encompassed murder, burglary, theft, criminal confinement, auto theft, and unlawful possession of a handgun. The court sentenced Larry to 86 years of imprisonment, ultimately concluding a chaotic legal odyssey linked to the tragic loss of Amanda Grace Blackburn and her unborn baby. The verdict undoubtedly brought solace to Amanda's grieving family. Davey even went as far as to express his forgiveness toward his wife's killers. However, the irreplaceable loss of Amanda remains a permanent void. Sadly, Amanda's son Weston has had to grow up without the presence of his mother, having only been allowed to spend 15 months with her. Weston celebrated his 9th birthday this year and has been thriving under the care of his father, who has found a new path in life. In December 2017, 2 years after Amanda's tragic death, Davey entered into a new chapter by marrying Christy Monroy, a single mother who attended Resonant Church and shared the same CrossFit gym with Davey. On November 4, 2019, Christy, who had a daughter named Natalia from her previous marriage, gave birth to Davey's son, Cohen David Parker Blackburn. Currently, the blended family is flourishing, as is evident from their active social media presence and blog posts. Usually, this would be the conclusion of our story. However, in this case, there are lingering unanswered questions and missing pieces of the puzzle that have left some people wondering if there's more to the story. Today, we will explore the alternate theories that have piqued people's curiosity, allowing you to form your own opinion. So without further delay, let's delve into the uncharted territory we've previously left unexplored. Before we proceed, we want to mention that most of this information consists of allegations or rumors, and Davey has never been under suspicion in the official investigation. We want to make it clear that we do not intend to spread misinformation or support any kind of propaganda. We apologize if anything we have said in this video has hurt somebody's feelings, as it is not our intention to do so. Some people believe that Davey might have been involved in his wife's murder and that he was the one who orchestrated it. Several factors have raised questions about his innocence. For starters, it was revealed during the investigation that just 2 months before Amanda's death, Davey had taken out a significant life insurance policy on her. Strangely, this policy came into effect after a mere 8 weeks. Coincidentally, right after Amanda's death. Davey benefited greatly from this, but was it intentional? No one knows. Coming back to the day of the home invasion, there were some unusual deviations in Davey's routine. Those familiar with Davy would attest that he typically left for the gym at 5:30 a.m., but on this particular day he was half an hour late. His wake-up time was no different than usual, leaving some to wonder about the reason for this anomaly. Furthermore, his workouts typically spanned an hour, but on this occasion, they lasted only 45 minutes, excluding the driving time. Additionally, some find it implausible that Davy would sit in his car for an entire hour without entering his home. In light of these anomalies, certain theories have emerged speculating that he might have been waiting for his wife's tragic fate to unfold. The 911 call in this case is a matter that has drawn significant attention among web sleuths, and for good reason. There are several troubling aspects to it. First and foremost, the time it took Davy to call 911 is unusual. He waited for almost 12 minutes before seeking help, despite discovering his spouse in a severely injured state and covered in blood. This extended delay raises questions. Moreover, the most unsettling part of the 911 call is Davy's strangely composed demeanor. While on the call, as the dispatcher connected to another line, Davy remained eerily silent. He made no effort to wake Amanda or communicate with her, even though he knew she was still breathing. This behavior is highly unusual given the severity of the situation. It's equally perplexing that Davy initially thought Amanda had been in an accident when in reality she had been viciously attacked and left for dead. These factors contribute to the mystery and speculation surrounding the case. There's another aspect of this case that has raised questions among some observers. They have pointed out how Davy appeared to be capitalizing on this tragedy. During Amanda's funeral, he continuously tweeted the hashtag #NothingIsWasted. Shortly after the funeral, he legally registered the domain name #NothingIsWasted and even used that quote to brand her tombstone. He went on to release a podcast, a book, and a blog, all under the same brand name, detailing his personal journey through Amanda's death and the healing process. Critics pointed out that some of his statements and blog posts seemed to revolve around himself, which has raised questions about potential narcissism. For instance, just hours after the arrest in the case, he released a statement in which he expressed rapid forgiveness for the individuals responsible for the death of his spouse. For some, the speed at which he chose to forgive those who had essentially torn his world apart was unsettling. His quote, "The best is yet to come," has led to speculation and discussions about Davy's motivations and behavior. Comparisons drawn from Davy's posts have highlighted how he sometimes appears distant in his narratives. Some people have observed that he presents the murder in a very matter-of-fact way and rarely mentions his unborn child, who tragically never had a chance to come into the world. On multiple occasions, Davy has expressed that while the incident has been painful for him, he wouldn't change any of it, and he believes that Amanda is where she needs to be, by Jesus' side. It's possible that Davy, as a man of faith, has accepted everything life has thrown his way, no matter how tragic. He might genuinely be grateful for the life he has been given, despite the immense losses he has suffered. However, whether coincidental or intentional, some of his behavior and statements have raised red flags for certain individuals. In a bizarre coincidence, just 2 weeks before Amanda's tragic death, Davy delivered a sermon in which he acted out a murder scene, repeatedly shooting someone in the back with an airsoft gun. This performance was intended to illustrate how worship could be metaphorically used as a weapon. If this video wasn't eerie enough, another incident left many people shocked. In 2018, Davy and his current wife, Christy, dressed as robbers for a Halloween party and even posted pictures on social media. What added to the unease was the presence of a ladder in the picture, bearing eerie similarities to the circumstances of Amanda's murder. This costume choice, coming just a few years after such a tragic event, raised numerous questions and concerns. Concerns have also been raised by some individuals regarding how swiftly authorities cleared Davy of suspicion. As a renowned local pastor with connections to influential figures and law enforcement, some believe that Davy was never thoroughly investigated. Additionally, theories began to circulate based on Davy and Amanda's own Q&A videos in which they discussed their marital difficulties and how they overcame them to become soulmates. Some people speculated that their marital problems led Davy to seek a way to eliminate his wife. However, it's important to note that while these theories sound like elements of a dark plot, They remain purely circumstantial and have never been substantiated. In fact, it's essential to acknowledge certain gaps in these theories, with a major one being, if Davy was involved in the murder, why did none of the individuals involved, Jalen, Dino, or Larry, ever mention his name? Ultimately, we leave it to our audience to decide whether the truth lies in what's already known or if there's something concealed beneath the surface, as we conclude our story here. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe Davy had any involvement in his wife's murder? Or do you consider these allegations to be entirely baseless, with the actual killer already behind bars? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. 17-year-old Gladys Serrano lived in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles in 1996. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had big dreams for her life. Gladys was last seen on January 28, 1996, leaving her home. When she failed to return home later in the day, she was reported missing by her family. 2 days later, her body was found off a main road in a ravine in Topanga Canyon. She had been assaulted and strangled. Serology evidence was collected from her body, and a DNA profile of the unknown offender was uploaded to the state and federal DNA databases, but a match could not be found. An extensive investigation was completed by the investigators at the time, but it led nowhere and the case went cold until 2019, when Los Angeles police arrested a man by the name of Jose Luis Garcia for domestic assault. During the booking process, DNA swabs were taken from Garcia and processed. Investigators then realized that his DNA matched the DNA that was taken from Gladys Arellano's body. Detectives visited Garcia and questioned him about Gladys. The crime took place when he was just 19 years old. They obtained a second DNA swab from him. The Los Angeles Crime Lab was then able to confirm that Garcia's genetic profile matched the unidentified sample taken from Gladys's body in 1996. 43-year-old Jose Luis Garcia was arrested by U.S. Marshals on September 29, 2019 in Dallas, Texas. He was extradited on October 14 to Los Angeles County, where he was held on a $1 million bail. Detective Hugo Rienarga said this case is typical of the type of unsolved cases that the detectives are faced with on a daily basis. We are gratified that we are successful in bringing this tragic case to a close. Rienarga confirmed that investigators were looking into the possibility that Garcia was involved in other crimes as well. Gladys Arellano's niece and goddaughter, Samantha Moreno, spoke movingly of the need to remember her godmother, as well as all other women who were victims of violence. Recognizing her life is important. Beautiful Latina souls from Boyle Heights should never be forgotten. Moreno said acts of violence against women should never be forgotten. Samantha Moreno thanked the detectives who never lost sight of finding justice. Gladys Arellano's case was worked on by retired detectives Joe Purcell and Sean McCarthy, who both work part-time on the Sheriff's Department's Unsolved Case Unit. Thank you for not giving up on our Gladys, who was a loving daughter, sister, aunt, and godmother. Gladys was only 17 when her life was taken. She had a beautiful soul. She was beautiful, intelligent, gorgeous, and she had a radiant smile. She had such big dreams for her life. My grandparents would have been so proud of her, Samantha Moreno said. She was grateful Garcia was off the streets after nearly a quarter century. We want nothing more than for him to pay for his brutal crime, she said. We recognize that this will not bring Gladys back, but we are relieved to know that there will be justice for Gladys. This is a victory that we acknowledge in her honor, and we look forward to more victories. Jose Luis Garcia was found guilty of all the charges against him on July 18, 2023. It was a day the loved ones of Gladys Arellano had been waiting decades for. It is never enough for having taken the life of such a beautiful soul, said Elizabeth Arellano, Gladys Arellano's sister and best friend. She told the court what Garcia did nearly destroyed them as they wondered for more than 25 years what happened to her. It was tough, but it felt really good to finally get it off your chest and actually like seeing him and, releasing it and having some kind of comfort, said Vanessa Arellano, Gladys Arellano's younger sister. Janet Ramirez, Gladys' close friend, said the plea deal gives her some comfort, but it is not enough. 19 years is never enough, but I have comfort knowing now she can rest, that the perpetrator is going to be behind bars because for 25 years, I've lived with the guilt of not knowing what I could have done different, Ramirez said. Jose Luis Garcia was sentenced on August 15, 2023 to 18 years and 8 months in prison for taking Gladys Serrano's life. Garcia pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter, kidnapping, and domestic assault. According to the district attorney's office, he waived his credit for the just over 1,000 days he has spent in jail since his 2020 arrest. Retired Sheriff's Detective Joe Purcell, who handled the cold case investigation, said, "The fact is that we can give justice to people and to society. It is really important not to let these cases go unresolved. We need to have people pay the debt they owe to society." Get ready to be engrossed in a tale that transcends time itself. A story of mystery and family awaits in a world where mysteries go unsolved. An intriguing story with enigmatic threads that is illuminated by hope. Introducing Melissa Highsmith, a name that has endured through the ages and is linked to resiliency and loss. On May 4th, 2023, a remarkable discovery took place in the center of Fort Worth, Texas, solving a 51-year-old mystery that had fascinated people for generations. The unthinkable was confirmed on this historic day by Fort Worth police through DNA testing. For the majority of her life, Melissa Highsmith, also known as Melanie, was actually the 22-month-old infant who, all those years ago, had been tragically abducted by her babysitter. In this video, we will unravel Melissa Highsmith's tale, which is one of love, grief, and resiliency that spans time and ends with a remarkable reunion of family members, torn apart by fate. We'll look at the series of incidents that took place before her family eventually located their sister and daughter, who had been missing for a long time. Let's travel back in time to the 1960s, to a blind date set up by Jeffrey Highsmith's roommate, which brought 18-year-old Alta Apentenko and 17-year-old Jeffrey Highsmith together. Jeffrey remembers with fondness his first thoughts upon seeing Alta's breathtaking beauty. Their quick encounter soon resulted in marital bliss in November 1968. Jeffrey was a year younger than Alta. A year later, on November 6, 1969, a joyful occasion occurred. The couple's firstborn, a beautiful baby girl they named Melissa Highsmith, brought joy into their lives. Melissa was born in Fort Worth, Texas, and got her name from one of Alta's friends. Jeffrey recalled Melissa as a happy, lively baby who was her father's favorite. Alta, on the other hand, found that becoming a parent was really difficult. Being the youngest of 12 children, Alta experienced adversity at a young age. The 6 youngest were placed in an orphanage when their mother was unable to care for all of her children. As a result, Alta spent 16 of her most formative years at the Christ Children's Home Church without ever feeling true maternal love. This lack of resources cast a pall over her mothering journey. Even though she had a difficult upbringing, Alta was unwavering in her determination to give Melissa the best life possible. The small family soon moved to southern Illinois, and life took a different turn from there, as Jeffrey and Alta were constantly at odds. Their constant fighting finally caused their marriage to fail. In earlier interviews, they offered their version of events. Jeffrey was criticized for his lack of fidelity and selfishness, and Alta was called stern and aloof. They ultimately made the decision to split up, because the negativity between them got too much. Alta looked to her brother Perry for help in the wake of the incident. With his help, she and their daughter Melissa were able to leave for Fort Worth, Texas, which appeared to be a good place to start over. They first shared a home with Ed, Alta's brother, and his spouse. But this was only a temporary arrangement as they later moved in with Carlene, Alta's niece. Alta, who had many siblings, did not feel inferior to Carlene because they were both the same age. Uncertainty surrounds what happened, but at some point the cohabitation broke down, forcing Alta and Melissa to take refuge with an old friend named Carol. Because they were raised in the same orphanage, Alta and Carol had a special relationship. Carol thought that living together would be a good idea because she also had a young son. While living with her friend Carol, Alta was able to get employment by doing cleaning for several churches. She was able to support herself and her daughter in this way. Jeffrey was completely missing from the picture and sending no money at all. Alta alone was responsible for overcoming these difficulties. Finding someone who could look after Melissa while she was at work became crucial because her new job was taking up the majority of her time. She made the decision to publish an advertisement in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on August 18, 1971. The advertisement read, "Spanish Gate Apartments is looking for a babysitter from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Make a call after 3 p.m. Shortly afterward, Alta received a response from a woman who expressed interest in taking on the role of babysitter. Back then, the idea of stranger danger wasn't as common. Thus, there was no way to identify this individual. Alta was forced to believe this woman when she said as much. Even so, she made an effort to establish some credibility by setting up a meeting in order to speak with the woman and get some important questions answered before giving her 22-month-old daughter to the babysitter. The woman never showed up for their scheduled meeting outside Alta's place of employment. Alta was under pressure to keep her job by reporting for work the following day, which caused her a great deal of anxiety due to this unanticipated hiccup. The babysitter promised Alta that she would take care of Melissa, even though she did not show up for their first appointment. She mentioned Melissa could have fun in her large backyard, which was a detail Alta found appealing. Despite their unsteady beginnings, Alta was forced to accept this babysitter's services because she was forced to do so by her professional obligations. As a result, Alta left her daughter Melissa in the temporary care of her roommate Carol on the morning of August 23, 1971. Interestingly, Carol didn't take on full-time babysitting duties that day despite having her own son. Although the precise causes of this are unknown, rumors circulated that she had prior arrangements. That August morning, Alta had to rush off to work, leaving Melissa and Carol, who was probably still drunk from the previous night, behind. It's assumed that someone came to the house at 8:30 a.m. The odd thing about this is that it's unclear if this person was a man or a woman. They identified themselves as Ruth Johnson and claimed to be Melissa's anticipated babysitter. The visitor's most distinctive feature was a pair of long white gloves, an odd, almost ostentatious choice, given the intense summer heat in Texas. The fact that gloves were present has sparked conjecture that they may have served as a preventative measure to remove any DNA evidence in addition to being a cunning ruse to conceal the subject's true gender. Carol did as directed and gave baby Melissa to this woman she could only refer to as Ruth Johnson. It's interesting that this person offered to look after Carol's son as well after entering the home. Carol turned down that offer for reasons that are unclear and passed Melissa on to her. This marked Melissa's final appearance for a really long time. Alta, who had been quite busy at work, had given the babysitter instructions to drop off Melissa by 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening when she got home. But the babysitter did not arrive, leaving Alta to wait tensely for Melissa. With no way to get in touch with her, Alta felt powerless. When Alta called the police, in a desperate attempt to locate her daughter, she was told that she would have to wait a torturous 24 hours for any action to be taken. Melissa had not been seen in a long time, even after the 24-hour market had ended. Due to the seriousness of the situation, the FBI and the Fort Worth police collaborated on the investigation, which focused on Melissa's father, Jeffrey, at first as a possible suspect. Jeffrey, who was equally shocked by Melissa's abrupt disappearance, was being watched. But as they dug further into the case, investigators started to turn from a family-centered viewpoint to a darker possibility. Recent research on non-family infant abduction carried out by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children stated that these kidnappings were frequently carried out by single women who were unable to conceive and therefore turned to stealing children from other people. In the decades that followed Melissa's kidnapping, this theory came to be accepted as the leading theory in the hunt for her. For Alta, the stormy days and weeks and eventually months had been extremely damaging. She became entangled in an unending circle of blame and guilt. It was unbearably painful to bear. It was a trial every day. With her heart aching, Alta tried to make amends with Jeffrey, who was having emotional problems of his own, and at first turned her offer down. It would take about 2 years for Jeffrey to make up his mind to move back to Fort Worth, where they would reaffirm their vows in a more private and intimate ceremony. Over the next few years, Alta and Jeffrey's lives saw joy reappear once more. They accepted 4 additional blessings. In addition to a son named Jeffrey, who was christened after his father with affection. They had 3 daughters named Rebecca, Vicky, and Sharon. There was nevertheless an unspoken secret. The kids didn't know their eldest sibling was missing. It remained a well-kept secret for many years, coming to light only when the kids were 8 or 9 years old. One day, Jeffrey, their father, decided to tell the children about Melissa. While Alta clung to her silence, her past haunting her constantly, and her guilt over Melissa's disappearance overwhelming her. The weight of this unfinished chapter grew as the year went by. They realized what had happened. They had a sister, a sibling who may still exist somewhere in the world today. For years, this idea stoked an insatiable curiosity and renewed interest in locating their sister Melissa, the family's missing piece. The family kept looking for Melissa nonstop, never giving up. They kept her name alive and in the public eye in the current era of technology by sharing their heartbreaking story through podcasts, newspapers, and even online forums like Web Sleuths. They embraced social media, setting up a Finding Melissa Highsmith Facebook page and requesting assistance from anyone who could lead them to the truth. The Highsmith family experienced heartbreak and hopelessness in their search for Melissa. They raced across states following every lead that looked promising, and their tenacity knew no bounds. Then, in September 2022, there was a ray of hope when an anonymous tip about a potential sighting in South Carolina was received by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Even though it finally came to a dead end, the family's desire to carry on searching was rekindled by that almost successful discovery. However, the pivotal moment occurred on November 6th, when Melissa's brother Jeffrey Highsmith received his 23andMe results, which disclosed an enigmatic match with a granddaughter he was unaware of. After he was rendered speechless by the news, Del Bosque looked into it more on Ancestry.com and discovered that the newly discovered grandchild had a last name in common with 2 boys who might be Melissa's nephews. The family experienced an overwhelming sense of hope and resolve as the puzzle pieces began to fit together. At last, after years of uncertainty and ceaseless searching, there appeared to be a breakthrough. They appeared to be making progress toward cracking the code of several decades and reuniting with Melissa, the missing link in their family, thanks to their tenacity and adept use of contemporary technology. They knew that even though the journey was far from over, they would not give up until they were able to embrace Melissa once more. The 3 children were positively identified as belonging to one of Melissa's sisters and the Highsmith sisters. Were overjoyed to learn that the DNA results showed a sibling match. They went to Lisa Joe, an amateur genealogist who painstakingly examined the DNA charts in search of more confirmation. Lisa quickly made it clear that there was no question about these kids being Melissa's biological relatives. With renewed resolve and hope, Lisa made contact with the adoptive father of the kids, who gave her important background information, including Melissa's first name and her ex-husband's full name. Armed with this knowledge, the sisters set out on a mission that finally brought them to Melissa's Facebook account. They sent her a heartfelt message, nervously expressing their belief that they were family. Melissa was first skeptical. Reaching out to a long-lost relative appeared unbelievable and almost too good to be true. But then the Highsmith revealed a very personal detail that touched Melissa's heart, which was a distinctive birthmark on her back. Her doubts gradually subsided, and she consented to take a DNA test in the hopes of at last discovering the answers she had been looking for so long. The Highsmith knew deep down that they had located the missing piece, but the suspense and excitement mounted as they awaited the results. Regardless of the result, their relationship with Melissa grew closer as the day of revelation drew near. They had already overcome a great deal, and their newfound bond was evidence of the steadfast love and resiliency of a family that had been split up by circumstance, but had come back together via tenacity and the strength of a common ancestor. The Highsmith family gathered at their beloved Fort Worth church on that unforgettable November 26th to celebrate Melissa's miraculous return. Victoria Garner was overcome with emotion and was unable to contain her happy tears. She was still in shock that her sister was standing in front of her, a reality they had long fantasized about. When the happy reunion finally set in, they were all in shock at how real it was that Melissa had been found. The family's relentless search for Melissa was disclosed in a statement from Sharon Highsmith, who lives in Spain and is looking forward to meeting her. The family's suffering and frustration were exacerbated by the mishandling of the case by various agencies during their grueling journey. However, at this point, all they want is to give Melissa a big hug, accept her into the family, and make up for the 50 years of priceless time they lost. Their enduring love, tenacity, and resolve are demonstrated by their reunion. A touching story about a family that comes together in spite of all obstacles, showing that love and hope can overcome even the most difficult mysteries. What is evident, though, is Melissa's profound sense of loneliness and unwelcomeness throughout her childhood. She had no idea, though, that her birth family was always looking for her. The Highsmith made sure to maintain her reputation in the public eye by throwing yearly birthday celebrations for her and making every effort to locate her. Unfortunately, justice was elusive because the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution ran out 2 decades after Melissa turned 18. Melissa is at last home, surrounded by the love and acceptance she had long yearned for, even though the whole truth may not yet be known. A devastating truth about Melissa's upbringing came to light during her reunion with her birth family. Her childhood was mysterious. She was raised under the name Melanie Mayoko. It's unclear if the woman who raised her was the same one who abducted her in the first place. She was raised by a woman she called Mom, but their relationship was tense from the start, and when she was 15 she moved out. This woman admitted she knew Melissa had been abducted when she was recently confronted by Melissa's sisters. Melissa's own words illuminated the painful childhood memory she carried with her. She said that she had never been close to her mother, and that her upbringing with her had been challenging and turbulent. Melissa was never permitted to play outside or enjoy the small pleasures of childhood. She had never been exposed to the outside world. This extreme sheltering was justified by extremely painful reasons. She was informed that her brain damage through home birth was the cause. The revelations highlighted Melissa's upbringing's emotional turmoil by exposing wounds that had been kept hidden for far too long. Melissa moved to Charleston, South Carolina, 1,000 miles away from her birthplace, somewhere along the way. Thanks to the internet's power, it was there that she made her first contact with her birth family. She was first dubious and thought it might be a scam, but as she read through the messages more carefully and got to know her new family, the truth became clear to her. Their mother was subjected to hurtful accusations following Melissa's disappearance, including the possibility that she was complicit in her daughter's disappearance, even though she was overcome with guilt. The family statement stressed that Melissa's care was entrusted to the person who volunteered to watch her while their mother worked, and that their mother did the best she could with the limited resources at her disposal. Their mother finally received justice. The Highsmith family offers a message of unwavering determination to those looking for missing loved ones, bringing closure to a difficult chapter in their lives. Never give up and follow up on all leads. Melissa's rediscovery was ultimately the result of their own unwavering pursuit, demonstrating that hope and perseverance can overcome even the most difficult situations. The long-standing mystery was resolved, and the truth was ultimately verified on the historic day of May 4, 2023. After completing the DNA testing, the Fort Worth police were able to confirm that Melissa Highsmith was, in fact, the 22-month-old child who was tragically abducted 51 years ago by her babysitter. Since the truth has come to light, Melissa is adjusting to a new chapter in her life that will be surrounded by her birth family's love and support. As she comes to terms with having 2 parents, 4 siblings, and a plethora of nieces and nephews who were eager to find her, the enormity of the discovery is beginning to sink in. Melissa was amazed by her large and loving family's revolution. She used to think that she didn't have many family members, but now she realizes that she has a large caring network of people who have never stopped looking for her. Her mother, with whom she instantly connected, is a touching example of the strength of familial bonds that endure despite time and space. Melissa is taking back her real first name and dropping the name Melanie, which she went by for the majority of her life, as she continues to come to terms with her new identity. Her wish to see her father walk her down the aisle in a rekindled marriage to her present spouse and her wish to spend more time with her mother are both lovely expressions of love and forgiveness. After this incredible journey of rediscovery, we are left with unanswered questions that make our hearts ache. All those years ago, who was this mysterious person wearing white gloves? Now that she's embraced her birth name and re-established contact with her family, what does her future hold? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. August 9th, 1980, high school sweethearts Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, both 19, disappeared after attending a wedding reception at Concord House, Concord, Wisconsin. Within the next few days, searchers found some clues about the couple's whereabouts scattered across town in Concord. A pair of pants, Tim's car with his wallet inside, some ropes, and a pair of women's underwear. These clues led to a grisly discovery. 2 months later, the bodies of Tim and Kelly were found savagely violated and left to rot in a field. Almost 3 decades later, advancements in DNA technology, coupled with an unlikely witness and an investigator's relentless search for truth, led to the identification of the perpetrator. A man so unassuming, even his neighbors had no idea he harbored such dark secrets. But who was this man? And why did it take so long to find him? Today's story takes us back to Concord, Wisconsin, a small town in Jefferson County, Wisconsin. With a population just over 2,000, the quiet town has many parks and nature spots, making it an excellent place for people who love the outdoors. So activities like hiking, biking, fishing, and camping are common among the locals. Concord has a violent crime rate about 7%, about a third of the U.S. average of 22.7%. In the 1980s, when the main events in today's story occur, Concord was the sort of place where people never locked their doors and neighbors looked out for each other. So, it was just the sort of place where 19-year-old high school sweethearts, Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, believed they could get married, settle on a farm, raise their children, and grow old together. In 1980, Tim Hack and Kelly Drew were 19-year-old high school sweethearts, engaged to be married. Although Tim lived with his family in Hebron, a small town in Jefferson County, and Kelly lived with her family in Fort Atkinson, also in Jefferson County, the couple first met when attending Fort Atkinson High School. Kelly was a beautiful, kind young woman with a passion for cosmetology. Tim was a strong and hardworking farm boy. They were both loved by their friends and family for their kind-hearted natures. But as a couple, Tim and Kelly were seen as people for other youngsters to aspire to be like. After high school, Tim started his career as a farmer, and his best friend was a tractor nicknamed the Lonesome Loser. Meanwhile, Kelly went to beauty school and had just graduated in 1980, hoping to become a hairstylist and beautician. On August 9th, 1980, Tim and Kelly attended a wedding reception at Concord House, Wisconsin. The couple had plans to meet some friends and go to a carnival after the reception, but they never showed up. The last time anyone saw them alive was around 11 p.m. on August 9th, 1980, when they left the reception. By the morning of the following day, August 10th, 1980, when they still hadn't been seen or heard from, Tim's father, David Hack, filed missing person reports for both of them. That same day, David found Tim's brown Oldsmobile in the Concord House's parking lot. Locked inside the car was Tim's wallet containing $67, his jacket, and his checkbook. On August 15th, searchers found Kelly's pants and underwear by the roadside, about 3 miles from Concord House, with male bodily fluids on them. They also found some ropes by the roadside that had been knotted by someone who appeared to have military experience. The discovery of these articles of clothing shifted the case drastically. Suddenly, it was no longer a matter of finding a couple who might have just decided to take off and have a romantic getaway. It was now a matter of trying to find them alive because they were likely in danger. About 2 months later, some squirrel hunters from Milwaukee were out in the Izone, Wisconsin area, 7 miles from the Concord House. While walking through a wooded area along a railroad track parallel to Highway 16 east of Watertown, they found the badly decomposed remains of Kelly Drew. She was completely naked. About 100 yards away, they found a fully clothed male body that was identified as the body of Tim Hack. The case, now officially a homicide, was dubbed the Sweetheart Murders. The cause of death was not immediately apparent because investigators found no murder weapon at the scene. However, upon examination, the medical examiner found stab wounds on Tim's body and ligature marks on Kelly. The bodily fluids found on Kelly's clothes also suggested assault. The Sweetheart murders had all the elements of a sensational story, so it started making headlines across the country. 2 teenage sweethearts appeared to have been murdered in a senseless act of violence, and police could not identify the killer or killers. Their investigation began while interviewing everyone who knew the couple, to find out if anyone might have hated them enough to kill them. Police also interviewed everyone who attended the wedding reception, including the Concord house staff who worked there that night. One of the questioned workers was Edward Wayne Edwards, a handyman working at the Concord house. Edward, who lived in a campground adjacent to the Concord house near Interstate 94, claimed that he had not seen the couple and that he was not even at the Concord house around the time the couple went missing. He claimed that he was deer hunting in the nearby woods. However, police noticed that he had a broken nose. When they asked him about it, he claimed he had gotten it during his deer hunting trip. It seemed weird to the investigators because this was August and deer hunting season in Wisconsin was around November. After the police questioned him, Edward moved his wife and his 5 children away from Wisconsin in September 1980. Meanwhile, the most promising lead investigators were eyewitness accounts of a dirty-looking van that had been parked next to Tim's car in the Concord house parking lot. Witnesses claimed that they noticed the van suddenly driving away suspiciously around the time Tim and Kelly were last seen. Edward had a van that fit that description, where he often kept a .357 revolver. But without a plate number or strong evidence connecting him to the crime scene, police could do very little to follow up on that lead. And like that, all other leads in the investigation dried up. The case file was shelved and the case went cold. In 2028, 20 years after the murders of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, Richard Lewell from the Wisconsin Department of Justice, one of the investigators in charge of the original investigation, asked for the case to be reopened. For almost 30 years, Lewell had been unable to let go of the case. For almost 30 years, Lewell had been unable to let go of the case. And now that he was close to retirement, he wanted to do everything in his power to close the case. In an interview, he said, "As I was reaching my retirement age, DNA was making drastic leaps and bounds. He felt more confident pursuing the case now because of technological and scientific advancements of the last couple of decades. His newfound confidence was reflected in how he approached the case with vigor." Lewell had a hunch that the police had already interviewed the killer in the earlier stages of the investigation and that the person's name would be on file. He just had to find it. After 2 months of digging through the files, witness statements, and interview recordings, one name stood out to Lewell. Edward Wayne Edwards. Not only did Edward have the opportunity and means to commit the crimes, but the fact that he moved his entire family out of Wisconsin shortly after police interviewed him raised red flags. Llewellyn and a team of cold case investigators decided to follow up on his hunch that Edward was the potential killer. When they interviewed Edward's neighbors from when he lived in Concord, Wisconsin, they learned that Edward had been a very difficult person to live with. He was short-tempered and volatile, a restless man who often beat his wife and children on a whim. They said he was basically a monster. His son John Edwards, who is now 37 years old in 2008, described him as a troubled man, saying, "I don't think he knew how to control his emotions. There was some type of rage there." In 2009, April Bellagio, Edward's daughter, contacted authorities with disturbing information. She said she knew some things about the cold case murder of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew that she believed could help investigators close the case. However, this information that she had implicated one of the men closest to her life, her father, Edward Wayne Edwards, a former Marine with a long history of crime. April was a curious child growing up, and her father's unusual life was the most fascinating puzzle to her. Throughout her life, she had questions about how her father lived and why the family had to move around so often. One day, when she was now an adult, she came across the news article about the unsolved murders of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, and she remembered that they had moved from Concord, Wisconsin around that time. The puzzle was finally falling into place, and she just knew she had to contact authorities. Edward Wayne Edwards was born in Akron, Ohio in 1933. He lost his parents at a young age and had to live in an orphanage run by nuns. Edward's time at the orphanage was marked with physical and emotional abuse, ultimately shaping him into a restless and rebellious teenager. He had several run-ins with the police for petty crimes like shoplifting and breaking and entering. And by 17, he was serving time at a juvenile detention center. By 1951, when Edward was 18, he was released from juvenile detention on the condition that he joined the U.S. Marines. But after just a few months as a Marine, Edward disappeared and had to be dishonorably discharged. He wasn't ready to leave the life of crime behind, because Edward soon found himself in jail again for robbery. By 1955, when he was 22, he escaped from jail in Akron and traveled across different states robbing gas stations. Edward would spend the rest of his 20s and 30s as a fugitive, drifting around the country while doing odd jobs here and there, working as a ship docker, vacuum cleaner retailer, and handyman. From his autobiography, it is easy to tell that Edward enjoyed his notoriety during this period. According to him, he never tried to use an alias or disguise his identity while committing his crimes because he wanted to be famous. In 1960, at 27, Edward was once again in prison, this time for attempting to impersonate a federal officer. However, he escaped from the Portland, Oregon jail where he was being held, prompting the FBI to place him on its 10 most wanted list in 1961. In 1962, authorities caught up with Edward and imprisoned him in the United States Penitentiary, Leavenworth, but he was paroled in 1967 for good behavior. In his memoir, he attributed his growth to the influence of a benevolent card at Leavenworth. After his parole, Edward got married and became a motivational speaker. In 1972, at age 39, Edward appeared on 2 television shows, To Tell the Truth and What's My Line. That same year, he released his autobiography, The Metamorphosis of a Criminal. True life story of Ed Edwards. It seemed like the stars were finally lining up for Edward. He had beaten the system. He was on his way to success. Unfortunately, Edward's good luck did not last long. In 1977, he committed his first murder. His victims were 21-year-old Billy Lavaco and his girlfriend, 18-year-old Judith Straub, residents of Sterling, Ohio. Billy and Judith went on a date on August 7, 1977, but never returned. Later that day, in the parking lot of Silver Creek Metro Park, with her shoes and purse still inside. The following day, August 8th, Norton Police, assisted by family members and a National Guard helicopter, launched a search for Billy and Judith. The search party found their bodies in the high weeds near the Metro Park. They had been shot point blank with a 20-gauge shotgun. At the time, investigators could not connect Billy and Judith's case to Edward, so he got away with the murders. These murders also established a pattern that would continue with the murders of Tim and Kelly. Meanwhile, by 1982, when he was 49, Edward was back behind bars in Pennsylvania for arson. But he was still proud of his criminal accomplishments because in 1993, he wrote a letter to the FBI requesting his criminal and history records for cities in 19 states. The records were supposedly for a new book he was writing about criminals he met while in prison, such as Tony Provenzano, Charles Manson, and Jimmy Hoffa. In 1996, Edward, 63 years old, committed his third murder. His victim was his foster son, 25-year-old Danny Boy Edwards, who lived with him in Burton, Ohio, for 7 years. Before he met his grisly end, Danny Boy was a soldier in the U.S. Army. Edward somehow convinced him to abscond from the Army and return home. When he got home, Edward tricked him into entering the nearby woods and then killed him with 2 gunshots to the face. Edward left Danny Boy's body in a shallow grave. A hunter eventually found it there and alerted the authorities. But like his first set of murders, Edward also got away with murdering Danny Boy for the next couple of years. People close to Edward, like his son John and his daughter April, described him as a troubled man. He was extremely abusive to his wife and children, resulting in his children moving away from home as soon as possible to escape his abuse. Investigators believed Edward fit the bill for the stereotypical serial killer. He had a long history of crime. He was physically violent with his family members. And the fact that he wrote a book about his crimes showed that he was a narcissist. Edward also had military experience, so he would have known how to tie the knot on the ropes investigators believed were used to strangle Kelly. In addition, Edward's history of arson fits perfectly with the image of someone extremely controlling. By the time he was in his mid-70s, he was overweight and had to move around in a wheelchair, depending on an oxygen tank to breathe. So his neighbors in Louisville, Kentucky had no idea that behind his elderly facade lay an evil mind that had done so much damage. However, with new evidence in April's statements, investigators now had a more solid reason to believe Edward might have been involved in the murders. They had to visit him. When investigators got to his home in Louisville and initially began questioning him, Edward denied knowing anything about the murders of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew. He claimed he hadn't heard anything about them going missing, although he had been questioned about it in 1980. But while investigators doubled down and pressed him more, confessed that he had drank some beers at the Concord house on that fateful night and that he may have seen the couple while he was drinking. He also said, contrary to his earlier statement, he had not been deer hunting that night. After the interview, investigators asked if they could take a swab of his saliva for DNA testing. Edward confidently said they could, believing the DNA test would not reveal anything he did not want investigators to know about. When the state crime lab tested Edward's DNA sample, it matched the DNA found on Kelly's pants. In 2009, Edwards had settled in a trailer park in Louisville, Kentucky. He was pleasant and friendly to his neighbors, and none of them suspected that he had such a dark history. That is until police picked him up and brought him to Wisconsin on July 31, 2009. He was charged with the murders of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew. While he was being interviewed, Edward was confronted with the results of the DNA test. Investigators asked him to explain how his bodily fluids came to be on Kelly's clothes. Edward started stuttering, cooking up a story about how he and Kelly had gotten intimate earlier that evening of August 9, 1980. But the act was consensual. He was shifting in his seat, moving his hands every which way, when he sensed the investigators were not buying his performance. He sighed and muttered something under his breath. After replaying the interview recording hundreds of times, investigators were confident they had heard what Edward said. "Damn it, I killed her." It was as good a confession as any. The gig was up for Edward, and he decided to plead guilty to the murder of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew. In April 2010, Edward Wayne Edwards was convicted of the 1980 Sweetheart murders and given 2 life sentences to run concurrently. Although Edward had asked to be executed, Wisconsin had no death penalty. But according to retired homicide detective Phil Waters, Edward had been in and out of prison. He knows what life is like. He's not a guy that wants to be sitting in a prison ward somewhere and dying a slow death. So hoping to convince the state to give him the death penalty, Edward wrote a letter to the Ohio prosecutor's office saying, "You're going to want to put a needle in my." Edward confessed to the murders of 21-year-old Billy Lovaco and 18-year-old Judith Straub, but it turned out that when he committed the murders in 1977, the death penalty was unconstitutional, so he did not get his wish. Instead, he was given a life sentence for each murder, but he still had one trick up his sleeve. In 2011, during a jailhouse interview, Edward confessed to killing his foster son, 25-year-old Danny Boy Edwards. His motive was the $250,000 life insurance policy he was set to receive upon Danny Boy's death. This time, his plan worked. On March 8, 2011, Edward was sentenced to death for the murder of Danny Boy Edwards. Although he was only convicted of 5 murders, police speculate that he could have at least 9 to 15 more undiscovered victims. In the book titled Peyton Allen Files, the author, Phil Stanford, suggested that Edward might have been responsible for the murders of Beverly Allen and Larry Peyton, which took place in Portland, Oregon in 1960. In March 2017, Detective Chad Garcia from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, one of the investigators in charge of the Sweetheart murders, suggested that Edward might have been responsible for 15 other murders, including the famous Zodiac killings. Retired homicide detective John Cameron also believed Edward was responsible for the Zodiac killings and other high-profile unsolved cases. But these claims have not been proven as of yet, so they are considered conspiracy theories. On April 7, 2011, Edward Edwards passed away at the Corrections Medical Center, Columbus, Ohio, at age 77. His death was of natural causes, a relatively merciful ending to a vicious crime spree that left 5 dead and dozens racked with grief. Edward escaped execution by lethal injection, which had been set for August 31, 2011. although Edward was eventually arrested, and he ultimately did not get away with the murders of Tim and Kelly. Their family members have not exactly found relief in that. Kelly's mother, Norma Walker, said instead of getting closure, Edward's arrest ripped open old wounds. She said, "You hoped this day would come, but now that it's here, it's really hard. Everything starts all over again. All the memories come back. He robbed me of my daughter, robbed me of my Christmases, birthdays, weddings, everything families do together." As for Tim's family, the fact that their son and his girlfriend's killer had been found was enough. Tim's father, David, said he was just glad it's over and was grateful for the DNA technology that confirmed Edward was the killer. April Bellagio, Edward's daughter whose tip helped close the cold case, now spends her time trying to help the families of victims with unsolved cases find closure. Through her podcast, The Clearing, she investigates cold murder cases and tries to get authorities to reopen them. With him, Hack and Kelly Drew had a bright future ahead of them that was violently snatched away by their killer, Edward Edwards. Edward, the serial killer, had nothing personal against the couple. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, which makes it all the more tragic. Although Edward ultimately got arrested and sentenced to death for his crimes, some believe he escaped justice by dying of natural causes just weeks before he was scheduled to be executed. The city of Eureka in Humboldt County, California is sometimes referred to as the heart of the U.S. Redwood Coast. However, on the downside, when compared to other locations with comparable populations, Eureka is ranked among the most dangerous cities in the nation. Eureka has a violent crime rate of 38.4, which is higher than the 22.7 national average. The town of Eureka was completely devastated by a horrifying crime that occurred there back in 1997. Slightly north of Eureka, in the deep Ryan Slough, a duck hunter found the severed torso of a woman on October 26, 1997. After notifying the Humboldt County Sheriff Department, an investigation into the matter was started right away. The torso had been stabbed 27 times and was cut down the middle, and the head, arms, legs, and breasts had all been chopped off. The detectives tried numerous times to identify the victim, but were never successful. Nevertheless, they estimated that the woman was between 18 and 25 years old, did not smoke, and had previously given birth. For a little while, this reduced the number on their list, but there was no luck. While the investigation to identify the slain woman continued, a little over 2 months later, in January 1998, an arm of a female body was found and recovered on Clam Beach, which is about 20 miles north of the Ryan Slough. The arm was found to belong to the same woman whose remains were found near Eureka. Her head, another arm, and some of her legs were still missing though. The Humboldt County Sheriff's Department put in a lot of overtime and effort to identify the victim, but it appeared to be an insurmountable task, given the lack of clues and the severely decomposed state of the remains. Months passed with virtually no development in the case. The woman's identity was still unknown. But as 1998 drew to a close, a startling twist in the case caught the investigator off guard and fundamentally changed the direction of the investigation. Wayne Adam Ford, then 36, entered the main Humboldt County Sheriff Department station on Tuesday, November 3, 1998, with the intention of making an odd confession. Rodney Calvin Ford, Wayne's brother, was also present. While the detectives searched him, Wayne was found to be in possession of a woman's severed body part that was sealed in a Ziploc bag. Wayne stopped trying to hide anything, so he willingly cooperated with the officers. Wayne confessed to the detectives that he had committed several crimes and that he had killed 4 women in the North State, including the nameless woman whose body was discovered in the Ryan Slough in October 1997. Rodney informed the detectives that Wayne had called him on November 2, 1998. Stating that he needed assistance with something. Wayne claimed he could no longer keep the secrets and that he wanted to turn himself in. Following Wayne's confession, Rodney persuaded him to come clean and turn himself in to the police, while he attempted to piece together what his brother had done. Wayne told the detectives that he turned himself in because, had he not, he might have killed his ex-wife after admitting to killing 4 women. He refrained from acting solely out of a desire to spare his son from suffering. He expressed regret for the harm he had caused to all those women. and revealed that his evil actions were motivated by resentment toward his ex-wife, who was preventing Wayne from seeing their son. Wayne claimed that this infuriated him and caused him to act in heinous ways. Those who knew Wayne said he had been disappointed trying to see his son ever since he and his wife got separated and divorced. Wayne's visitation rights were severely restricted by the terms of his divorce from his ex-wife. On November 3, 1998, was taken into custody without any delay. Dennis Dewis, the sheriff of Humboldt County, spent 3.5 hours interviewing Wayne in an effort to get detailed information about his victims that would aid in their identification. Wayne claimed to have dismembered 3 of his victims and strangled the other one. Wayne listed for women who were hitchhikers. Wayne acknowledged that he had attacked each of them before mutilating and strangling them. Wayne reported to the police that on October 17, 1997, he picked up his first victim, whom he thought was a hitchhiker. He continued to describe the horrific events of that day, including how he had attacked her, strangled her, and then severed her body. The possibility that the woman Wayne was referring to could be the one whose remains were discovered in October 1997 occurred to the detectives. However, did not seem to remember the name or face of that woman. During the course of the investigation, detectives searched places where Wayne had lived and discovered more remains that they believed belonged to the unidentified woman. The investigators also discovered that Wayne attempted to cook some of the unidentified woman's remains and stored them in his trayless freezer nearly a year. The woman's identity remained a mystery despite this information, and numerous body parts were still missing. Tina Renee Gibbs, a Las Vegas prostitute who is 28 years old, is the second victim that Wayne picked up sometime in 1998. Tina's naked body was discovered on June 2, 1998 in the California Aqueduct close to the Kern County town of Buttonwillow. Tina was the only known victim of Wayne's that had not had her body severed. She had been strangled to death. In September 1998, for months after he had attacked and killed Tina, Wayne picked his third victim and struck again. This time, he picked up a 25-year-old Fontana prostitute named Lynette Dion White next to an Ontario truck. On September 25, 1998, Lynette's nude body was found floating in a San Joaquin County irrigation canal. The exact cause of Lynette's death was still unknown, but it was thought to be homicidal violence with an unclear ideology. Wayne admitted to the detectives that he had paid Lynette to stay with him for a night the night she passed away. Wayne killed 29-year-old Patricia and Tamez less than a month later. She was his fourth and final victim before he turned himself in. On October 23, 1998, Patricia's naked body was discovered floating in the California Aqueduct in San Bernardino County, close to Hesperia. One of her breasts had been chopped off and she had been strangled. When Wayne entered the police station to turn himself in, this was the body part he had been carrying in the Ziploc bag for over a week. Patricia was taken by Wayne from a convenience store, and similar to Tina, he paid her to stay the night. Sadly, Patricia also did not make it. Patricia's cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a possible thoracic spine fracture, as well as a broken neck beneath her shoulders. Wayne was being held at the Humboldt County Jail on murder charges with a $1 million bail. The detectives reported that Wayne was contrite and seemed to have come to a realization about his involvement in certain things in life. Wayne's past was investigated further by the authorities to see if he had been involved in any other killings. On December 3, 1961, Wayne Adam Ford was born in Petaluma, California. He was the second child born to an immigrant German mother and an American father. When he was 10 years old, his parents divorced, which had a lasting impact on his life and led him to enroll in the U.S. Marine Corps after dropping out of high school. Before receiving an honorable discharge in 1985, he served for 6 years. Wayne was struck by an inebriated driver in an accident that occurred in November of 1980. He suffered a head injury in the accident and spent 9 days in a coma. Wayne's family claims that following that incident, his personality underwent a significant transformation. Wayne began to experience psychological problems in 1983, and these problems only got worse over time, necessitating multiple hospital stays. Wayne received a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder not long afterward. Wayne had several run-ins with the law in the years that followed, including accusations that he had beaten and robbed a prostitute in Garden Grove, California, in 1986. He was taken into custody in 1990 on charges of animal abuse, and he spent a little time behind bars in San Clemente, California. Wayne was a bad husband to both of his wives, who eventually filed for divorce. After he had 2 marriages, Wayne worked as a long-haul truck driver and lived in a trailer park in Arcata, California, between 1997 and 1998, the year of the murders. In a San Bernardino County court on June 27, 2006, Wayne was found guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder, and he received a death sentence in August of 2006. He is currently incarcerated in San Quentin State Prison in California on death row. Investigators never gave up trying to identify the unidentified female victim of Wayne over the years. In an effort to find leads, they frequently examined missing person reports from the entire West Coast. They even tried using DNA databases to try and identify her. The woman's DNA was added to the National Unidentified Persons DNA Index, as well as the California Missing Persons DNA database. The DNA profile was regularly compared in the combined index system with profiles of other remains and missing persons. Regretfully, there was never a profile match. The woman's identity was still a mystery. William Hansol, the sheriff of Humboldt County, established a cold case unit in 2021 and tasked 2 investigators with the sole responsibility of reviewing and examining their department's unresolved cases in search of fresh leads. In December 2022, the Humboldt County Sheriff Department collaborated with the California Department of Justice and Othram, a forensic genealogy lab, to investigate the possibility of using advanced forensic DNA testing to identify the unidentified woman or a close relative. Courtesy of Detectives Othram received a DNA sample from the woman's preserved remains. Forensic genome sequencing was employed by Othram scientists to create a thorough DNA profile of the woman. By using this profile for forensic genealogy, the investigators were able to find a possible DNA match that took them to Kathy Cummings. Investigators speculated that Kathy may be a close relative of the woman who was never identified. The detectives got in touch with Kathy and inquired about any missing family members. According to her statement, Carrie Ann Cummings, her sister, had vanished from the mid-1990s. The detectives asked Kathy about the last time she had any communication with Carrie. Pushing herself to focus more, Kathy remembered the last time she had seen her sister Carrie, which was in 1997. After obtaining a sample of Kathy's DNA, investigators compared it to the sample found on the deceased woman. At last, there was a match. The remains of Carrie Ann Cummings were formally identified in June 2023. Carrie was, as it turned out, only 25 years old when she was killed. Carrie's identity had been unknown for 25 years, but it was no longer a mystery. To provide Carrie's family some closure, the detectives contacted them and told them of Carrie's tragic case. Carrie's sister Kathy informed the detectives that although she was a lovely, intelligent, and humorous woman, she was suffering from an untreated mental illness. Before the family lost contact with her in 1997, she was couch surfing in Eugene, Oregon. Kathy claims that her family attempted to file a missing persons report for Carrie in 1997 when she was reported missing in Oregon and Arizona. But for various reasons, the report was never filed. Carrie's family was informed that she was an adult who had made her own lifestyle choices. There was nothing the police could do if she posed no threat to herself or others. Carrie was never added to any national databases or listed as missing as a result of this. The investigators hoped that this identification would help provide some closure and peace of mind, even though they were aware that they could not ease Carrie's family's suffering. In addition to giving them pride, Carrie's case gave them hope that more cases like hers could be resolved with perseverance. The Humboldt County Coroner's Division is currently working to return Carrie's remains to her family so that a fitting funeral and burial can take place. Wayne Adam Ford is still incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison on death row. While the detectives continue to be committed to reviewing cold cases in collaboration with Othram and the California Department of Justice. The body of a male was found on June 11, 1984, by a farmer in rural Lincoln County, Missouri. The body was discovered inside a pump house near Highway FA outside Troy, Missouri. The man was wearing an expensive Bill Blass-gray suit with red pinstripes, a winter tie, and a cashmere pea coat. An autopsy determined that the man lost his life months before being found. He suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the back of the head. Analysis performed at the time of discovery suggested that these were the remains of an adult male of European ancestry, and he was between 40 and 80 years old. He likely stood between 6 feet to 6'2" inches tall. Unfortunately, investigators were not able to name the victim, let alone the perpetrator, so the case went cold. Then on March 29, 2023, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office announced in a press conference that the John Doe had been identified through a DNA match as Jack Langeneckert, a 50-year-old real estate agent who had been living with his wife and son in Florissant, Missouri, when he went missing in 1982. The breakthrough is thanks to forensic genetic genealogy, the increasingly common practice of identifying DNA through comparisons to genetic profiles in genealogy databases. Now that detectives have a name, Captain David Hill said they are working to solve who took Jack's life and how his body ended up on a Lincoln County farm. One of the interesting things about cold cases that are this old is you have to rebuild, Hill said. Who did they hang out with? Who are their friends? Where did they work? What did they do? Authorities believe Jack Langenecker lost his life not long after he went missing in 1982. His car was found a week after his disappearance at the Lambert Airport. Hill said it was too early in the investigation to elaborate more on the details of Jack's disappearance, including why someone may have wanted to hurt him. According to Hill, Jack's family said they filed a missing person report when he went missing, but sheriff's investigators are still trying to find investigative files from the 1982 case. Jack's remains were first tested for DNA in 2015, but lab researchers were not able to find a match in the DNA database, which contains DNA profiles obtained by law enforcement. The sheriff's office reopened the case after a Southeast Missouri State University anthropology professor, Dr. Jennifer Bengtson, offered in 2021 to help the cold case unit identify human remains. The professor and her advanced students identify which parts of the skeletal remains are best for testing and pay through grants and donations for DNA labs and to do genetic analysis. Othram, a private DNA lab specializing in cold cases, performed the analysis in Jack Langeneckert case. Dr. Jennifer Bengtson said, "The number of human remains still left unidentified is a tragedy of the scale that most people do not realize. Even though my lab is small, I'm really proud of my students for helping bring answers to these families." Around 2:30 a.m. on June 18, 2014, Robin Rutherford called 911 operators in Hamilton, Ohio to report the most bizarre thing. Her husband, 55-year-old Alfred Rutherford, had shot their daughter 29-year-old Lacey Rutherford and her boyfriend, 41-year-old Steve Watkins, over a drug-related argument. When police arrived at the house at 2710 Hilda Avenue, they were shocked to discover that Alfred had shot his daughter right in front of his grandson, 6-year-old Brian, and some other kids at the house for a sleepover. When police eventually caught Alfred, all he had to say was, "They ought to pin a medal on me for this." Why did Alfred Rutherford kill his daughter and her boyfriend over a simple argument? Before disaster struck, the Rutherford family lived in Hamilton, Ohio in Butler County, Ohio. The large city of Hamilton has a population of about 63,000 people and is famous for its vibrant art scene. Known as the City of Sculpture, you can find over 40 sculptures while exploring Hamilton, and you might enjoy a tour of the renowned Pyramid Hill Sculpture Park and Museum. Hamilton has a violent crime rate of 26.5%, higher than the national average of 22.7%. But for the Rutherfords, Hamilton was home despite its flaws. Lacey Rutherford was a 29-year-old mother of one, and she had a drug addiction. She and her parents, Robin Rutherford and Alfred Rutherford, often got into fairly serious arguments over her drug use, particularly her heroin addiction. Lacey grew up to become a troubled young woman who frequently had issues with the police, sometimes drug-related. By June 2014, Lacey had accumulated 5 cases at the Hamilton Municipal Court dating back to 2012. Some of her charges included theft, driving under suspension, drug abuse, and possession of drug abuse instruments. She had also fallen on some hard times because she couldn't keep a job for long and she spent all her money on recreational drugs. So she had to move in with her parents. On June 17, 2014, Lacey appeared in municipal court on drug-related charges. At the time in June 2014, 29-year-old Lacey and her 6-year-old son Brian lived with Lacey's parents in Hamilton. Around 2:30 a.m. on June 18, 2014, 911 operators received a call from Robin Rutherford at 2710 Hilda Avenue. She claimed that her husband, Alfred Rutherford, had just shot their daughter, Lacey, and the daughter's boyfriend, Steve. According to Robin, Alfred had immediately fled the scene in his red Escort after committing the murders. In the background, the 911 operator heard the sound of someone crying. When they asked Robin who it was, she said it was Lacey's son, 6-year-old Brian. Robin told the operator that she saw Alfred fleeing the scene in his red Escort, but she could not see the license number. First responders to the scene found Lacey lying in a pool of blood in the hallway. She had been shot multiple times, including a shot to the throat with a shotgun. As they swept the house to find out if there were other active shooters in the house, police found Steve in the bathroom. He had been shot once in the head with a shotgun. Brian, Lacey's son, and one of his friends had been in the house that night for a sleepover. While the kids were sleeping, Lacey and her father got into an argument over a gun that Alfred believed was missing. Alfred asked Lacey if she knew where the gun was because he suspected she had sold the gun to buy drugs. But the gun was not the only bone of contention. Lacey was going through a rough patch and she had to move back in with her parents to save on rent cost. However, according to Alfred, Lacey allowed her friends to enter the house and steal things. In fact, he believed the missing gun was with Steve. As the argument got heated, Robin, Alfred's wife, got involved and started questioning her daughter about the gun's whereabouts and her drug addiction. Soon, boiling over in a rage, Alfred brought out his 12-gauge shotgun. When Lacey saw that her father had brought out the gun, she felt panicked, but in her anger dared him to shoot her. She said he couldn't, that he didn't have the stomach for it. It would be the last thing she ever said. Alfred raised his shotgun and fired several shots at Lacey, one of them hitting her in the throat. Lacey's 6-year-old son Brian, who had been observing the fight, stood unmoving as he watched his grandfather shoot his mother to death. After murdering Lacey, Alfred went in search of her boyfriend Steve and found him in the bathroom. He raised his shotgun and fired once into his head, killing him instantly. Hamilton Police Chief Scott Scromitzi later described the scene as very tragic. He said, "Unfortunately, there was a house full of people. Terrible situation because a number of them were children. The victim's son was present. It's a horrible situation. Just a horrible situation." Alfred Rutherford, affectionately known as Ike to his friends, was a troublesome and troubled man. Growing up, Alfred had several run-ins with the police for petty crimes, like stealing and loitering. By 2014, he had built himself a long and colorful rap sheet. In Hamilton Municipal Court, Alfred had 17 cases, dating back to 1989. Some of the charges included operating a vehicle impaired, robbery, drug abuse, and obstructing official business. But despite his legal troubles, Alfred was known as a nice guy to people around him, and his friends loved him. After searching for him for about 9 hours, police eventually located Alfred at Joyce Park off River Road, Hamilton, around 11 a.m. on June 18, 2014. He had ditched the red Escort and was now walking along Joe Knox Hall Boulevard, unarmed. Once police found him and arrested him, he was indicted by a Butler County grand jury for capital murder. Alfred was charged with 1 count of aggravated murder with a death specification for allegedly shooting Steve Watkins and 1 count of first-degree murder for shooting his daughter, Lacey. He was also charged with 1 count of having weapons on her disability and 1 count of being a repeat violent offender. His bond was set at $2 million. While in custody, Alfred admitted that he had murdered his daughter and her boyfriend without showing even an ounce of regret for his actions. Police officers reported that during a phone call, he was overheard bragging about his crimes, saying, "They ought to pin a medal on me for this one." Still, prosecutors offered him a plea deal, plead guilty, and avoid the death sentence. Prosecutors believed the case was simple. There were multiple witnesses ready to testify that Alfred was the killer, and all the evidence pointed at him added to the fact that he had already confessed to the murders. A trial would only put unnecessary strain on the poor boy who had watched his mother die, and Robin who had to call it in. But this was not enough to convince Alfred to take the plea deal. Meanwhile, Alfred's lawyers, Greg Howard and David Washington, were working round the clock to convince Alfred to take the plea deal before the prosecutor's office withdrew it. According to Howard, the lawyers just wanted to make sure he was able to make his decision knowingly and intelligently and voluntarily. We had shown him all the evidence in this case months ago, and once again wanted to reiterate to him that this is what the jury is going to see and the prosecutor is going to get up and call you a monster. It took showing Alfred the grotesque photos from the crime scene for prosecutors to convince him to accept the plea deal. He later told Judge Keith Spath, "I seen them pathetic pictures this morning and it broke my heart." Finally, a moment of contrition. Alfred was no longer looking to be pinned with a medal for murdering his own family. In January 2015, Alfred Rutherford was sentenced to life without parole for the murder of his daughter Lacey and her boyfriend Steve. Alfred was already suffering from a liver disease called cirrhosis before the trial. At the time of the trial, doctors had given him 16 months to live. He would pass away 2 years later in 2017, alone and terminally ill. Dying 2 years after he began serving his sentence may be viewed by some as him escaping justice, especially after robbing his grandson Brian of a life with his mother. Alfred murdered his daughter and her boyfriend in cold blood in front of his grandson. Although he pleaded guilty, he never gave a reason for doing what he did, if there was a reason. Do you believe justice was served in this case, or should he not have been offered a plea deal and given the death penalty instead? On May 10, 1990, Jan Cornell received the devastating news she had feared the most. Rushing up the stairs of her Cape Coral home in Florida, her heart sank as she discovered her 11-year-old daughter, Robin Cornell, lifeless on the floor. Tragically, her friend and roommate, Lisa Story, who had been babysitting Robin that night, was also found dead in the house. Jan Cornell clung to hope, desperately wishing for a miracle that would bring her daughter back to life. However, as the harsh reality set in, she spent the next 26 years praying for justice, longing for the arrest of the person responsible for taking the lives of her daughter and best friend. The gruesome details that emerged from the investigation shocked everyone involved. The question lingered: who could have committed such a twisted act against this young girl and her mother's friend? Would the perpetrator ever be apprehended and held accountable for their actions? Cape Coral, a vibrant city in Lee County, Florida, was the backdrop for this tragedy. Established as a planned community in 1957, just 33 years prior to the incident, Cape Coral was a bustling city with a population of approximately 223,000 people. The Cape Coral Courtyard condominiums, where Jan Cornell resided, consisted of 1- and 2-story wood-paneled townhouses. In the 1990s, crime data for Cape Coral was scarce, but in the 2000s, the crime rate stood at 271 incidents per 100,000 residents. The waterfront community was known for its diversity, housing individuals from various backgrounds, social classes, and races. Robin Marie Cornell, born on November 30th, 1978, was the beloved daughter of Jan Cornell, a single mother who worked at Cape Coral Hospital. At the time of the tragedy, Robin was an 11-year-old student at Tropic Isles Elementary School in Cape Coral. She was a spirited tomboy who excelled in sports and games, often outperforming the boys. Despite any challenges she faced, Robin remained a happy and resilient 5th grader who thrived academically. Robin had an older sister, who had left home following an argument with their mother. Jan Cornell and Lisa Story shared a close friendship and both worked at Cape Coral Medical Center. Lisa's older sister, Susan Gibson, portrayed her as an individual who had a fondness for motorcycles and a deep passion for photography, among other interests. Unfortunately, both of their lives were tragically cut short by an elusive killer. On May 9, 1990, Jan Cornell, Lisa's friend and co-worker at Cape Coral Hospital, welcomed her as a roommate in her condo. This was just a day before the horrifying murder took place. With Lisa at home, Chan had the opportunity to spend time with her boyfriend, Donnie Batista, and watch a basketball game. Initially, Chan hesitated to leave as it was late, but Lisa encouraged her to have fun and assured her that she would babysit Robin. Jan vividly remembered the last words she said to her daughter before leaving. "I'm going to Donnie's. I love you." When Jan returned home in the early hours of May 10, 1990, she was confronted with a distressing scene that would haunt her for years to come. Despite instructing her roommate not to use the deadbolt on the doors, Jan found her front door bolted. She heard footsteps initially, believing someone was approaching. But after waiting without seeing anyone, she discovered the back door open. Upon entering the house, she was met with a chaotic and disheveled environment. Cabinets were open, clothes were scattered on the floor, and it appeared as though the apartment had been ransacked. What sent shivers down Jan's spine was the sight of picture frames of her daughter Robin and Lisa's elder sister placed side by side on the ironing board. Overwhelmed with fear, she rushed up the stairs, desperately calling out for her child. Upon reaching the room, she discovered her daughter lying face down on the bedroom floor, a pillow supporting her torso, her nitrous pushed up to her neck, and her body cold and covered in blood. Despite the obvious signs of rigor mortis, Jan, consumed by the hope of a miracle, attempted to revive her daughter. "I knew she was dead," Jan recalled with a heavy heart. As an individual who had experience in the medical field, she observed that rigor mortis had already set in. Jern's neighbor, Madeline Munch, vividly recalled being awakened on that fateful day by loud screams coming from the adjacent house. These screams were followed by anguished cries of, "Baby, my baby." Lisa was also discovered deceased in another room, having suffered the same fate as Robin. As later revealed by the investigators, the Corpus Christi Police Department's first course of action was to send the bodies for autopsies, which unveiled even more gruesome details surrounding the circumstances of their deaths. Not only had the killer suffocated his victims, but he also subjected their bodies to further indignity after death. The murderer had assaulted the bodies of his victims. Although the identity of the killer remained unknown, he left behind evidence at the crime scene. His bodily fluid was found on Robin's bedsheets and inside her body. Additionally, a set of Toyota keys with an Etienne Ana logo on the keychain was left behind. Detectives determined that these keys could have belonged to various Toyota models, but none of them were discovered during the search for the killer. As several years passed, leads dwindled, and the prospects of finding the killer grew dimmer by the day. However, the police never gave up their pursuit. Despite years of searching and leads leading to dead ends, the Cape Coral Police Department persisted in their investigation. They thoroughly examined individuals close to Robin and 32-year-old Lisa, as well as focusing on the community. As a result, 19 neighbors were identified as potential suspects. According to his ex-girlfriend, one of the initial 19 suspects exhibited suspicious behavior and fled the town shortly after the investigation commenced. His hair reportedly matched the hair found on the victims' bodies. Surprisingly, he was not arrested. Cornell initially had the intention to cremate her daughter after her passing. However, she was advised to preserve the body for potential forensic investigation. In 2010, officials eventually released her daughter's body, stating that it could no longer be used for investigative purposes. In 2015, a glimmer of hope emerged when the CCPD received a detailed, multi-page letter pointing towards a possible suspect. The writer provided thorough explanations for naming the suspect, prompting the detectives to pursue the lead and investigate the individual. Ellis expressed her excitement, stating, "It was probably the most excited that I've gotten on any tips or calls that have come in." Jan, who had family members in law enforcement, received advice not to get too hopeful during the process. Over the years, as various leads surfaced and different detectives worked on the case, Jen learned to maintain an open mind to avoid feeling overwhelmed by disappointment when those leads turned out to be dead ends. Nevertheless, she admitted that she couldn't help but hold her breath every time she received a call from the police department. With all the evidence gathered, The only remaining task was to match the suspect's DNA to the one found at the crime scene. A significant breakthrough seemed imminent. Unfortunately, this hope was quickly shattered as the testing revealed that the DNA did not match the named suspect. Ellis stated, "It was not our guy." On the 2016 anniversary of Lisa and Robin's death, the CCPD disclosed that Detective Christy Jo Ellis had been diligently working on the cold case for several years. "We firmly believe that this is solvable," Ellis affirmed. "It's just going to take the right information." Every year, the CCPD strives to raise public awareness of the case, hoping to trigger someone's memory and solve the murder. In 2016, a digital billboard on College Parkway and Fort Myers displayed information about the double homicide. Jan, too, refused to give up on finding the killer of her daughter and friend. Detective Ellis commended Jan for her unwavering determination, emphasizing that she was consistently accessible and had the ability to recall individuals from that period, aiding in the contextualization of crucial evidence. The tragic deaths of Lisa and Robin deeply shook the tranquil and tightly knit condominium community. Jan herself developed a sense of distrust towards her neighbors when no one came forward with information regarding her daughter's untimely demise. During an interview with the Cape Coral Police Department in 2013, Jan expressed a firm belief that someone within the community possessed knowledge about the case but chose to withhold it. It would take several decades before the perpetrator of this heinous crime was apprehended. 26 years after the perplexing murder, a 54-year-old man named Joseph Sealer was arrested by the police for shooting his stepson with a pellet gun on August 27, 2016. He was charged with assault and subsequently received a 5-year prison sentence at Lee County Jail. During his time in custody, his DNA was collected and entered into the national database, providing the CCPD with an opportunity to link him to the unsolved murder case. Following routine checks on the database, a match was finally found. The CCPD wasted no time and immediately began questioning Zealot the day after the discovery. He evaded their inquiries, claiming to have lost most of his memories prior to 1998, due to a motorcycle accident. However, there was no evidence to support his memory loss, and with the DNA evidence pointing towards him, he was charged with the double murders and brought to trial. When Jan was informed that the killer's DNA had been matched through the database, she could hardly believe her ears. For 45 minutes, she repeatedly exclaimed, "Oh my God!" She stated, "I always knew that justice would prevail. I have prayed for this every day for 26 years and could never let go of the pain he inflicted on my child and my friend." Cornell relayed this sentiment to the reporters. During the opening statements, prosecutors revealed that the bodily fluid found on the bedsheet where Robin was sleeping matched Sealer's DNA with an incredibly rare frequency of 1/700 billion. Even before the trial began, Zella had sent threatening letters to Cornell warning her that he would make her life unbearable by subjecting her to the entire American court system if she didn't halt the murder investigation. Additionally, he faced charges of witness tampering related to these letters. Throughout the homicide trial, which commenced on May 8, 2023, Zella consistently displayed an aggressive demeanor. Not only was he violent towards his own attorney, but he also exhibited rudeness and a complete disregard for the court and the jury, who held his fate in their hands. His unsettling and disruptive behavior seemed calculated to create an atmosphere of fear in the courtroom and make trial attendees uncomfortable. At the start of his trial at the Lee County Courthouse, Joseph Sealer sent a chilling message to viewers by etching the word killer onto ill-fitting veneers. He then proceeded to flash his teeth while locking eyes with the cameras. In another court appearance, the 61-year-old even raised his middle finger at the entire court. Defense attorney Lee Hollander informed reporters that Zeller's conduct on the witness stand did not aid his case. According to Hollander, witnessing Zeller's antics during his testimony was akin to witnessing a catastrophic train wreck. During his defense, Zealer made the shocking claim that his DNA was present at the crime scene due to his previous intimate relations with Jan Cornell several months prior to the double homicide. Prosecutors swiftly refuted this claim, asserting that it was impossible for his bodily fluid to remain detectable long after the alleged encounter. Zealer then proceeded to insult the victim's mother, referring to her as a pig who never washed her sheets. Jan expressed her strong disapproval of the outrageous allegations, firmly stating that she had never encountered her daughter's killer before his arrest. She also observed how Zieler carried himself with a heartless arrogance throughout the trial. The murderer would frequently lock eyes with her from the defense table and even wow on the witness stand, using it as a tactic to intimidate her. During a sentencing in June 2023, Zieler unexpectedly displayed an act of aggression towards his own attorney, Kevin Shirley. Initially, Zieler gestured as if to whisper something to Shirley, but then suddenly elbowed the lawyer in the face without any apparent reason. This incident immediately prompted court bailers to intervene and tackle and restrain Zieler. Dr. Julie Harper, the psychologist who evaluated Zieler over 3 sessions, noted that his past and present violent behavior could be explained by a combination of current health issues and childhood trauma. She expressed concern due to the significant age difference between Zieler's parents and the possibility that Zielasner may have been a child molester due to his interest in younger individuals. The prosecutor's arguments relied on 3 crucial pieces of evidence referred to as the Big Three: Robin Cornell, a pillow, and a sheet. In their closing statement, the state prosecutors presented key points necessary to establish the possibility of imposing the death penalty. They argued that the murders were intentional and that Zela had the opportunity to spare Robin and Lisa's lives, but chose not to. Considering the overwhelming evidence against him, the Florida jury reached a guilty verdict on 2 counts of first-degree murder against Zela. On May 18, 2023, the jurors voted 10-2 in favor of recommending a death sentence, with the other 2 favoring a minimum of 25 years imprisonment. Zela was ultimately sentenced to death on June 26, 2023. Elaine Belling, a neighbor of the Cornells at the time of the murder, faithfully attended the trials. During her conversation with journalists, she made several remarks about Zieler's behavior, which ultimately influenced the verdict. According to her, Zieler's decision to testify and his disruptive actions throughout the trial played a significant role in the final outcome. Until he took the stand, there was always a lingering doubt about who this person really was, but that uncertainty vanished. Belling stated, despite being found guilty and receiving a death sentence, Zieler maintained his innocence during the sentencing, even resorting to shouting at the jurors. His own lawyers argued that he had no motive for the crime. In response to the guilty verdict and subsequent sentencing, Jan expressed a sense of relief, knowing that the most severe punishment had been given to the monstrous individual who took her daughter and friend away from her. Nothing can replace the feeling of hearing today that justice has been served for Robin and Lisa, Jan told reporters after the trial. He has received the ultimate punishment that the state of Florida can impose, which is the death penalty. After Zela was sentenced to death, Jan returned home and approached the container holding her daughter's ashes, which sat on the mantel. With a solemn tone, she finally whispered to her daughter that everything was finally over. "You can rest now," she said. Speaking at the eventual sentencing, CCPD Chief Anthony Sizemore acknowledged that advancements in DNA technology played a role in solving the case, but he also emphasized the relentless determination of the police officials, which ultimately led to a breakthrough. As the enigmatic case reaches its conclusion within the confines of the courtroom, certain inquiries continue to captivate inquisitive individuals. What motivated Zieler to single out Robin Cornell and Lisa Story? Despite overwhelming evidence against him, he admonitably maintained his innocence. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.